Hello and welcome to my very first video on YouTube. I am not technically inclined, so the quality is not going to be great. If anyone wants to help me with that, that'd be great. Um, so if you're new to the Wide Awake Bible Study, basically my goal, we had kind of built it up to between like 40 and 50 people on Facebook. I don't want it to be huge or anything like that. My goal is to get the word out. Um, and if whatever you want to do with it, you can do with it. But I do feel this like pressing burden to just share the truth with whoever wants to hear it. Um, and more this year, God has just been like blowing my mind using scripture, and being able to dig deeper has been so rewarding. I am reading, and I won't read a lot today. I'm just going to go over the Parashat, which is just the Old Testament Torah portions. This is a Messianic family, Jewish family Bible, and I love the translation. It's the Tree of Life version, and I really like just how it uses a lot of the Jewish or Hebrew names. And I like how it always points to Yeshua from the Old Testament, and any commentary, anything that's cross referenced is just like mind blowing. So, and it has a lot of helpful things like in the back of the book. It has a big thing with, it says helps. If you could see this here, it has the weekly scripture readings already out. So this week is week 14, Vayera, and it means I appeared. And so the reading for the Torah is Exodus 6:2 through 9:35. And then the Haftarah, which is prophets, writings, anything that comes after the Torah, before the New Testament, is this week it's Ezekiel 28:25 through 29:21. And then we have Revelation 16, verses 1 through 21. That's what they have marked out. Now, the New Testament portions often are different depending on where you look. And so I just read all the ones that I can find because the more the better, right? But ultimately, those are up to interpretation because in Ezra, when they kind of sectioned off what they were going to read, they only had the Torah. They only had the books of the law, so that's all they had to work with, and everything else has been determined over the years by the Hebrew messianic community based on how it applies to what's being read through the Torah. So, anyhow, um, here we go. So we're on Parashat Vayera, which is I appeared, and he sure did. um, he came, he appeared to Moses, but then he appeared to the Egyptians and the Hebrews. Okay, so starting in verse 2, God spoke further to Moses and said to him, I am Adonai. I appeared to Abraham and to Isaac and Jacob as El Shaddai, yet my name, and in a lot of translations it's Yahweh, or Yahuwah, however you want to pronounce it. It's Yod He Vav He, which there are no vowels really. So Yahweh, Yehovah, it could be a W, a U, or a V, the Vav. So we really don't know exactly how he pronounced it. But the bottom line is he revealed his name, which in the Bible, someone's name is actually their character, their being. It's a description of who they are. So more than just the name being the important thing, it's the character of God being revealed through what he is about to do on behalf of his people. So that's kind of what's more important. I know there's been this like constant discussion in all of these circles of this is God's name, no, this is God's name. Guys, like the most important thing is that we understand his character. Is it important to call him by name? Yes, because I wouldn't call my husband, hey boy, because when we say God, that's essentially what we're doing. There are many gods, unfortunately, but there's only one true Father, and his name is Yahweh, Yahuwah, Jehovah, Adonai, whatever you want to call him. He has many names, but his character, he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Okay, and that's what I'm learning more and more through reading the whole Bible, not just the back of the book or the front of the book, but piecing it all together. And every part of everything that has been written has pointed to Yeshua, God in form of man who came and died and rose again to redeem us. And he is the Torah. So when you hear the Torah, you hear Yeshua because he is the embodiment of all of it in the flesh. So anyway, that's where I'm coming from. And if you are new to Torah or if you are new to the Bible, welcome, because we're all learning. And no matter how long or how many years you have studied this book, it doesn't get stale. And you can always learn more and more and more and more from it. So anyway, yeah, that's my whole spiel. Yet, by my name, I did not make myself known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan. I'm sorry, I have a little sniffle, and it's literally just hit me after I dusted because we live on the ranch. The land of their pilgrimage where they journeyed. Furthermore, I have heard the groaning of Bnei Israel, which is the sons of Israel, whom the Egyptians are keeping in bondage. Okay, so if you were listening on Facebook, which I have deleted, if you were listening on Facebook, I mentioned that in the book of Joshua, which is like the extra biblical history book and the account of the Old Testament and the Torah rewritten, and it goes line upon line along with the stories of the Bible. So anyway, there's a lot of question about the validity, but it's pretty much succinct. Every story lines up. So anyway, in Jasher, it talks about how they were able to enslave the Hebrews, because if you read, the Hebrews were outnumbering the Egyptians. And so you just think, like, how were they able to do this? Well, look at our country. And I spoke about it a little bit last week, that I had just seen a video right before I went live in the Facebook group that people were discovering that America was actually Egypt 2.0, literally. And if you read even further back in the book of Joshua, it talks about how Egypt and the Pharaoh and the system in Egypt was established and actually happened during the life of Nimrod, who was the very first representation of the spirit of the Antichrist on earth. That's a whole other video, which I hope to do. Anyhow, so that began, Nimrod appointed the first pharaoh. It was a whole situation, and they continued to call, that wasn't his name, but they continued to call the king Pharaoh from there on out. Okay, and they set up a system based on taxes that hadn't been in place before that day. They were basically taxing people to bury their dead, and then blew out of control from there. And so just think parallel Babylon, which was Nimrod's king. He was king of the known world, honestly. Everyone answered to him. Tower of Babel, that was his creation. He was definitely out to destroy Yahweh. There was the spirit of Hasatan, Satan, was in him, working in him and through him. So just to give you a backstory, the Israelites, the sons of Israel, of course, moved to Goshen when Joseph was appointed second in command, because he helped the whole world through a 7-year famine and saved everybody, okay, through God, through him. And he was a type of Christ, of Yeshua. So he moved his whole entire family, which at the time was 70 people, if you included all the descendants that were alive at the time. And so they weren't a nation yet. They were a family, and they moved to Goshen, which was the area allotted to them. It was like the best part of the land of Egypt. So they got the best of the land, even though they were refugees. God looked after them, and he continued to bless them because they kept his word and they kept their covenant with him, and he kept his with them. So they were in Goshen, and this was prophesied to Abraham. Remember, God, when he called Abraham, said, I'm going to give you this land, but you're going to go away for 400 years. So the 400 years was not all slavery. It was actually when Joseph set foot in Egypt as a slave. Well, it was slavery, but he was elevated to that position. So anyhow, if y'all see like things sparkling, it's the reflection of my pocket. Okay, so the family of Jacob, Israel, began to flourish, began to grow. They multiplied and multiplied and multiplied, because what was God's very first command to Adam and Eve? Be fruitful and multiply. So these people knew their father, they knew what he wanted for them, and they did what he said. So they were being obedient and they were flourishing and they were in the best of the land. So after a certain time, they forgot about Joseph, that he literally was like their founding father. There was a reset that happened. The whole land of Egypt sold all of their possessions to Joseph, well, to Pharaoh, because he had the food and they needed to survive. So if you go back and read, which isn't far back, they were indebted to the kingship. So the Egyptians actually became slaves before the Hebrews did. And as time went on, and Joseph passed away, Jacob passed away, Joseph passed away, they began to forget. And this is very common in our lives as well. We forget where we come from, and so we repeat history. And it's not a good situation. So thinking parallel, our nation being very much an extension of Babylon, or the daughter of Babylon, which is what Egypt was a part of, just keep that in mind. And so as they became jealous of the Israelites and even scared of them, they said, let's go ahead and trick them. So they didn't just straight up say, now we're your masters, because that wouldn't work, would it? And look at our country, look at our economy, look at the way things are set up. I'm speaking to our current situation. So at the same time, I'm telling you the history. So they decided they were going to build 2 storage cities, because remember, Egypt gave all their goods and all their land to Pharaoh, so they needed to have a place to store all these possessions. So I think it was Pithom, and what was the other one? Ramesses, yes. And so they began to build those 2 cities, and they said to the Israelites, let's make Egypt great. Make Egypt great again. Anyway, so they said, let's go ahead and work together, and we will give you wages for all the hours that you put in every week helping us build these storage cities. So their place was in Goshen, but they said, let's take you out of Goshen for a little bit every day, and you're going to help us, and we're going to help each other, and we're going to pay you. So it's really a win-win, right? Sure. So their slavery began as employment. But the underlying agenda, which is still today the underlying agenda, if you ask me, was to destroy the family unit. They wanted to get the husbands and fathers away from their families. This was literally how it was written in Jasher. And so that they couldn't reproduce as frequently. They would be gone all day. So instead of working their own land and their own property, they would be out of the home. This was not a common thing until it was established through the Egyptians, okay? Everybody before would work their land and sell their goods. And they would have like 1 day a week where they'd go to the market and sell. But the rest of their time was spent at home with their families. So this is how things progressed into slavery, because little by little, the ones who were working together with them decided to pull out slowly, one person at a time, and they were being promoted as taskmasters. And then before the Israelites knew it, they were the only ones. They looked around and they're like, where did the Egyptians go? Well, they were lording over them. And at that point, they had allowed it to happen, so they became the slaves because they just stopped paying them. And so not only were they away from their families, but what's funny is if you look back before this, in chapter 1 of Exodus, it says, but the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and the more they spread. I love it. So I really do feel like this is very applicable to us, especially if you understand about the children of Israel and how they were assimilated into the nations after they went into captivity in Assyria. Judah and Benjamin, those two tribes, were held captive in Babylon for 70 years and they returned. But the rest of the sons of Israel in the Parashat later on were dispersed. And so um, even today, scripture lets us know that we are those sons and daughters, okay? We have been spread across the whole world. Even if you are not a blood relative to a Hebrew, that's not the point. Okay, so they were keeping them in bondage, and God said, I've remembered my covenant. Therefore say to the sons of Israel, I'm Adonai, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will deliver you from bondage and redeem you with an outstretched arm and great judgments. I will take you to myself as my people, and I will be your God, and you will know that I am Adonai, your God, who brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. So I will bring you into the land that I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and give it to you as an inheritance. I am Adonai. He keeps saying, I am Adonai. I am Yahweh. This is who I am. He was establishing who he was with his people in their deliverance. Okay. What's next? So Moses spoke this way to the sons of Israel, but they did not listen to him because of their broken spirit and cruel bondage. So Adonai told Moses, go speak to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, so that will he let Ben Israel go out of this land. But Moses said to Adonai, the sons of Israel have not listened to me. So how would Pharaoh listen to me? I who have uncircumcised lips. And that's a whole other story in Jasher, but basically he had a speech issue. Okay, that's all we're going to say. Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron and gave them a charge for the sons of Israel and Pharaoh king of Egypt to bring the sons of Israel out of the land of Egypt. Okay, so then he goes into the heads of their houses. They were from the tribe of Reuben and Levi. Moses and Aaron, they were brothers. And the Levites, actually, when the children of Israel went into slavery, they were the only tribe who was not enslaved. How do you think Aaron and Moses were able to go in and out as they pleased during this whole thing? They weren't working, because when the Egyptians came to all the tribes and said, this is our plan to make Egypt great, the Levites realized, hey, they're tricking us. We don't think that this is an upstanding offer. We're going to head out. So they stayed in Goshen and they did not participate in the system of the beast. Like, honestly, that's what this is. And so that's why Aaron, as a priest of Levi, was able to come in and out. And what's funny is they didn't. It goes in, I'm going to go into too much detail, but this is why. And so if you read the book of Jasher, which I highly recommend, that will give you a little more insight into because I always wondered, like, why were they outside of the law, basically? Why were they not slaves? And so if you read that, it gives you some understanding. All right, so they went into their lineage, and then in chapter 7, Adonai said to Moses, see, I have set you as God to Pharaoh, and Aaron your brother will be your prophet. So they were essentially, Moses was another type of Christ, which there are many in the Old Testament, which it just continues to repeat over and over. You're to speak all that I command. You and your brother, Aaron your brother, are to speak to Pharaoh, so that he will let the sons of Israel go out of his land. Yet I will harden Pharaoh's heart and multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. But Pharaoh will not listen to you, so I will lay my hand upon Egypt, or it says that he will put down a fist, basically, is what it says in other translations. And I'll bring forth my armies, my people. So he calls them his armies, which I love, out of the land of Egypt by great judgments. The Egyptians will know that I am God when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring out the sons of Israel from among them. So Moses and Aaron did as Adonai commanded them. Moses was 80 years old and Aaron was 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. Adonai told Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh speaks to you saying, prove yourselves with a miracle, then you are to say to Aaron, take your staff and cast it down before Pharaoh so that it may become a serpent. And if you read on, he does this. And then the sorcerers that are in the palace do the same thing. If you read in Jasher, again, one of those sorcerers, the head of all of them, was Balaam, who was the son of Beor, who was born to Laban. Actually, Balaam was the son of, he was the grandson of Beor, I believe, who was the son of Laban. So they came out of the house of Laban, who was at war with Jacob. And they hated the sons of Israel, like from the get-go. They fought. His grandfather, great-grandfather, like fought all of this. So it's no surprise that they're still in the place to be able to accuse the Israelites and to mock them, basically. And it all started with jealousy, if you read back in the history book. So it's a pretty interesting account. Anyway, so that's that. They have this power struggle going on from the beginning. So Moses and Aaron go to talk to Pharaoh, and they throw the staff down. It becomes a serpent. Aaron's staff swallows up all of the other sorcerers' staffs or their serpents, and then he takes it back in his hand. There's always this thing. So the plagues begin. And first one is the plague of blood. He tells him, take your staff and put it over the water. And all the water in Egypt, including the Nile River, all of the ponds, all of the streams, they're going to turn to blood, and the fish are going to die, and they won't be able to drink water. And it'll cause Pharaoh to come to you and say, okay, like, help us out here. And the sorcerers were all able to replicate up to a certain point all of the plagues, okay? So they were able to turn their own little bit of water into blood too. If you've watched The Prince of Egypt, the Disney depiction, which is not 100% accurate, but it's a pretty cool movie, they do this. You know, they do all their little magic to try to show Pharaoh, well, this isn't anything special. Like, we're still as powerful as them. And so the first is the plague of blood in the water. And then it says the magicians did the same with their secret arts or their sorcery. So Pharaoh's heart was hardened and he didn't listen to them, just as Adonai had said would happen. So he turned and went into his house. He didn't even take it to heart. So the Egyptians dug around the river for water to drink because they could not drink the water from the Nile. 7 days were fulfilled after Adonai struck the Nile. So for one whole week, people were without just like their normal source of drinking water. Then Adonai said to Moses, go to Pharaoh and say to him, this is what Adonai said, let my people go so they may serve me. And so here's the thing. The first initial request was not let us go forever. It was let us go to celebrate our biblical feast on the mountain of God. That's pretty cool. So the next plague was the frogs, and they were literally in the beds, coming out of the ovens. They were on all the silverware. It was something. Then here we go, the Egyptians, their sorcerers were able to replicate and create the same thing. So Pharaoh's heart was hardened. All right. And then, so it was frogs and then gnats. And I want to read about the gnats because, so the sorcerers of Egypt could replicate all the same plagues, but there's one thing they couldn't do that Moses did every time. And it was that Pharaoh would tell Moses, you have to pray to your God and ask for this to leave us. And every time he prayed, God answered him. And Moses even said, I want you to tell me the time that you want me to pray, because I want you to understand that it was the Lord's mercy removing this plague. It's so crazy. So the frogs are literally in their beds, and you'd think Pharaoh would say, like, right now, toot sweet. And he's like, no, tomorrow. And it's so interesting to me because the more the American people seem to be pushed right now, the more they're like, well, it's just a mask. Or I just can't go get my groceries, or, I have to do curbside, and, oh, well,